Bread is everywhere. Toast at breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, rolls, naan, or pita with dinner. It's cheap, fast, comforting, and for many of us, automatic. So when you hear someone say, "I gave up bread and I feel amazing," it's tempting to think there's magic in the act of quitting. Today we're going to do something more useful than hype. We'll look at what really changes when you stop eating bread, why some people feel better almost immediately, why others don't, how to replace it without losing important nutrients, what happens to energy, weight, cravings, gut health, and training, and, most importantly, how to run your own simple 2-week experiment so your body, not internet opinions, gives you the answer. Start with the most common reason people drop bread: weight and appetite control. White sandwich bread and many soft rolls are high glycemic. They digest quickly and raise blood glucose and insulin faster than sturdier whole grain or rye loaves. When glucose shoots up, it often dips hard a couple of hours later, and that dip feels like urgent hunger, low mood, or brain fog. That's the cycle a lot of people are trying to escape. University databases that catalog the glycemic index consistently place standard white bread toward the high end, and dietetic groups use it as a classic example of a fast carb. When someone stops eating that style of bread, the first thing they often report is steadier energy, fewer "I need a snack now" moments, because they have removed a frequent trigger for sharp swings. That's not willpower, that's physiology. But not all bread behaves the same. Dense whole grain loaves, true sourdoughs, and rye-heavy breads tend to have more fiber, more intact grain structure, and fermentation that slows digestion. Large reviews in medical journals have linked higher whole grain intake with lower cardiovascular risk and better long-term health outcomes. In plain English, if your bread is mostly whole grain and you're eating sensible portions, removing it without a plan can mean losing fiber, B vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients that were helping you. The win is less about bread versus no bread, and more about which bread, how much, and what you pair it with. There's also the fortification angle. Many countries add nutrients like folic acid to bread-making flour and use iodized salt in bread to support population health. If you suddenly cut bread and don't replace those nutrients, you can slide into lower intakes of folate and iodine, important for cell growth, metabolism, and thyroid function. That doesn't mean you must eat bread, it means you should swap smart. Seafoods, seaweed snacks, dairy, or iodized salt can backfill iodine. Legumes and leafy greens help with folate. Fortified non-dairy alternatives can play a role too. A quick label check where you live will tell you whether your usual bread was a meaningful contributor. What about those dramatic first-week changes people post online? 2 things are happening. First, glycogen and water. Carbohydrate is stored with water, so when you reduce a frequent refined carb source, you drop a little water weight in the first days. Second, routine displacement. A white bread-based lunch often comes with spreads, sauces, and sides that add sodium and ultra-processed fats. Swap the whole meal pattern for protein, vegetables, and a slower carb, and your body will feel the difference fast. Less bloat, more even energy. If you're used to bread at multiple meals, don't be surprised by cravings for 3 to 5 days. Your brain likes predictable quick hits. A reliable way to blunt those cravings is to lift protein to roughly 25 to 35 grams per meal and add fiber-rich sides, legumes, salad, vegetables, or seeds. Randomized studies show that protein plus fiber raises satiety signals like GLP-1 and PYY and reduces later snacking without any extreme rules. Gut health is the next big piece. Your microbiome loves fermentable fibers from intact grains. If you pull out whole grain bread and fail to replace that fiber, you may feed your gut bugs less well, and some people notice changes in regularity or a bit of digestive discomfort. On the other hand, some people with sensitive guts feel better removing modern soft breads that include certain additives or rapidly fermentable carbs. Reviews on gluten-free diets show that when people go bread-free and drop other grains, the microbial community shifts, sometimes reducing bacteria that make butyrate, a helpful short-chain fatty acid. The fix is simple. If you stop bread, keep fiber variety high with oats, barley if you tolerate gluten, legumes, ground flax or chia, vegetables, and fruit skins. Your gut wants diversity more than it wants a specific loaf. Let's talk gluten clearly and calmly. About 1% of people have celiac disease. For them, gluten causes immune-mediated damage to the small intestine and must be avoided for life. There's also a group with non-celiac gluten sensitivity who experience reproducible symptoms: bloating, pain, fogginess, that ease when gluten is removed and recur on re-challenge, even though intestinal damage isn't present. For these people, giving up gluten-containing bread can be life-changing. For most others, removing gluten doesn't automatically make a diet healthier. It can simply make it different, and often more expensive. Many gluten-free breads are lower in fiber and higher in starches or added sugars and fats to mimic texture. The principle is to evaluate your response. If you suspect an issue, speak to your clinician first. Celiac testing must be done before you remove gluten. Then run a short, structured trial with careful reintroduction so you're acting on data, not fear. Now consider athletic performance and training. If bread was your go-to pre-workout carb and you remove it without substituting anything, you might feel flat at evening sessions for a week or two. Performance nutrition research consistently shows that timing and type of carbohydrate matter. Swapping to a slower release option, legumes at lunch, a piece of fruit or yogurt pre-training, often restores pop in the gym without bringing back large bread portions. There's also a longer-term maintenance angle. Higher GI patterns after weight loss are associated with easier weight regain, while lower GI staples tend to make maintenance easier for many people. You don't need to fear every gram of starch. You just need to place it where your body handles it best. Something you can do today that makes bread gentler, if you choose to keep it, is surprisingly basic: fermentation, fiber, and fat. True sourdough fermentation can reduce the glycemic impact and improve mineral bioavailability by breaking down phytates. Choosing dense, seeded whole grain or rye breads increases fiber and slows the glucose curve. And pairing bread with protein and healthy fat, eggs, tuna, hummus, olive oil, avocado, further lowers the net glycemic hit. Even kitchen techniques help. Cooling and reheating starchy foods raises resistant starch. Freezing bread, thawing, and toasting can slightly change the way your body handles it compared with fresh baked. Researchers exploring resistant starch have repeatedly shown smaller glucose excursions with cooled then reheated starches versus fresh, and that principle applies beyond pasta to rice and bread products. Techniques won't save an oversized portion, but they're useful edges. There's a mental and social layer too. Bread is cultural. Chapati with family, baguette at a cafe, dumplings with friends. If you frame your change as, "I'm not allowed bread," you'll trigger a deprivation mindset. If you frame it as, "I'm choosing foods that keep my energy even," adherence becomes easier. A practical line that works in social settings is, "I'm experimenting with starch earlier in the day and more protein at night. I feel better that way." You're not criticizing anyone else, you're explaining your experiment. Most people will nod and pass you the grilled chicken. Now let's build the 2-week test so you can get a clear answer with minimal fuss. For the next 14 days, anchor each meal with a palm-sized serve of protein, eggs, fish, poultry, tofu, tempeh, beans, or Greek yogurt. Add 2 fists of colorful vegetables, and choose a cupped hand of a slower carb like legumes, quinoa, buckwheat, or cooled brown rice at lunch. Breakfast can be higher protein with fruit if you like, and dinner becomes protein plus veg with minimal starch. This earlier-in-the-day carb placement lines up with chrononutrition research. Several groups, including researchers in Surrey and elsewhere, have reported better overnight metabolic profiles when the main carbohydrate load is placed earlier rather than late at night. It's not a commandment, it's a lever you can pull and measure. Measure something concrete so you're not guessing. First thing in the morning, before breakfast, note your waist at the navel, your weight if you track it, your sleep quality, your afternoon energy, and your cravings score out of 10. Do that on day 1 and again on day 14. If you love data, use a simple fingerstick glucose meter on 2 lunches in week 1. 1 day with your old bread-based meal, 1 day with the new slower carb. Check at 60 and 90 minutes. You don't need perfection, you're looking for direction. Expect a few predictable bumps. Day 2 or 3, you might really want bread. Have a plan. Add 5 or 10 grams of extra protein and a glass of water, go for a brisk 5-minute walk, wait 15 minutes. Most cravings fade if you don't feed them immediately. If you get constipated because you unknowingly cut fiber, add legumes, chia pudding, or a serve of oats if you tolerate them. and lift your fluids. If your training dips, put a small piece of fruit or half a yogurt 60 to 90 minutes pre-workout and reassess. The test is not a vow, it's controlled curiosity. At the end of 2 weeks, you'll fall into one of a few camps. Camp 1. You feel better, steadier energy, calmer gut, maybe a centimeter or 3 off the waist, less mindless snacking. In that case, keep going, and don't get perfectionistic about it. You've found a pattern that suits your body. Camp 2. You feel about the same, which means bread probably wasn't the lever for you. Focus instead on total calorie balance, protein sufficiency, sleep, and daily movement. Camp 3. You feel worse, low energy, digestion off, training weaker. That tells you bread wasn't the problem or that you removed the wrong kind. In this camp, reintroduce a better bread in the morning or at lunch only. Dense whole grain, rye, or naturally fermented sourdough. Keep the portion to 1 or 2 slices. Pair it with protein and fat, and see if your energy and digestion improve while your appetite stays in check. A quick note about children, pregnancy, and special medical conditions. Patterns and needs differ. Growing kids and athletes with high energy demands can include quality breads without issue. People with diabetes, thyroid conditions, coeliac disease, or anyone who is or could become pregnant should personalize choices with their clinician or dietitian. Bread can be part of a healthy diet. It can also be the stumbling block for someone living on soft white slices and spreads. Context is everything. If you're thinking about cost and access, lean on staples that deliver fiber and protein without draining your wallet. Tinned beans, lentils, eggs, frozen vegetables, yogurt, and oats are affordable almost everywhere. A pot of legumes cooked once can become salad toppers, wraps, if you choose to keep wraps in, or sides across several meals. If you choose gluten-free breads, compare labels. Look for whole grain flours, seeds, and fiber, not just starches and sugar. If you bake, consider experimenting with long-fermented sourdough or rye. Home fermentation gives you control over ingredients and can produce a loaf that's more filling on smaller portions. Energy timing deserves one last practical tip. Many people feel and sleep better when their biggest carbohydrate hit arrives earlier in the day, and their evening meal is centered on protein, vegetables, and healthy fats. Researchers studying circadian rhythms have repeatedly found that late-night eating pushes insulin and digestion into the time your brain and body want to repair. Try moving starch to breakfast or lunch, keep dinner lighter on grains, and pay attention to how you sleep and how you wake. If you do include bread, earlier is usually smarter than later. So what does giving up bread really do for your health? If your usual loaf is soft white and portions are generous, removing it often reduces glucose swings, cravings, and fluid retention within days, and that steadier energy makes it easier to keep a calorie deficit without feeling punished. If your usual loaf is dense whole grain or sourdough, dropping it without thoughtful swaps can lower fiber and some micronutrients and may not improve anything at all. In countries where flour is fortified, you'll need to backfill folate and iodine from other foods or fortified alternatives. For some people with gluten-related conditions, removing bread is non-negotiable. For most others, the winning move is to upgrade bread quality, right-size the portion, pair it with protein and healthy fat, and place it earlier in the day. If you want a simple next step, try this for the next week. Choose one meal you currently anchor with bread and rebuild it around protein, vegetables, and a slower carb. Swap a ham and cheese toastie for a lentil and tuna salad with olive oil and lemon. Swap a dinner bread basket for roasted vegetables and a yogurt herb sauce. Notice your focus 2 hours later. Notice your cravings at 4 p.m. Notice your sleep. Then tell me in the comments what changed first. Energy, appetite, waist, training, skin, mood, and where you live. Because culture and staple foods shape our choices. Your real-world data will help thousands of people watching this decide whether bread is their lever or just a scapegoat. If this helped you think more clearly about bread, tap like so the algorithm shows it to someone who needs a calmer, evidence-based take. Subscribe if you want more myth-busting, high-retention guides on carbs, hormones, sleep, and practical fat loss. Next up, I'm testing whether cooled rice at breakfast can keep blood sugar flatter all day, and how a 10-minute walk after meals compares to a single 30-minute session for fat control. Until then, eat with intention, not fear. Your body responds to patterns, not one food.